What a beautiful song. All those happy women celebrating that love is real. I'd like to take us back in history a bit. The time, the late 14th century. The place, Europe. This is what we call the Middle Ages, in large part because this is the time between the end of the Roman Empire and its civilization and achievements, and the beginning of the European Renaissance and the modern Europe that came out of that. So the Middle Ages. It's a time of terrible upheaval, a time of terrible suffering, injustice, and ignorance. It's a time when lots of people died in extreme poverty and lived very short lives. For example, if I lived in the Middle Ages at 42, I would be a very old woman. I would be a crone in the Middle Ages. People lived short, difficult lives. So on May 8th, in 1373, there lived a woman who was in her early 30s, so getting on in her years, in Norwich, England, and she was very ill. Everyone thought that she was dying, including her. We don't know exactly what illness she had, but it could easily have been the dreaded Black Death, the bubonic plague, which took the lives of a third of the world's population. Now, Julian was a deeply religious woman, although she was not a nun. And like most people in Europe during that era, she believed with her whole heart in the power of healing through prayer to Jesus Christ. Now, what made Julian different than all of those other sick people who were praying for a miracle and healing? While Julian was ill, she had what she calls her 16 revelations, which she believed were conversations with her God. I'm not going to read those today because they're very long and flowery, but you can absolutely find them online if you're curious about them. The important thing is Julian's era in her own life were times of great suffering. And throughout all of her personal suffering, she hears God's tender voice. And that voice is saying to her, yes, there is suffering, but all will be well. All of the shame, pain, and cruelty of the era in which she lived, Julian still believed in a God that taught tenderness, compassion, and love. And in our own world, an era that has its own amount of suffering, pain, and cruelty, we are also called to teach tenderness, compassion, and love. But that's hard. I don't know about you, but I need help if I'm going to keep teaching tenderness, compassion, and love, keep showing tenderness, compassion, and love. I get angry and I get discouraged. And that's why I need two things. One, I need my connection to all of you, my faith community. And two, I need connection with the great mystery, the spirit of life that we will sing to in just a few minutes. Things that connect me to my community of faith and to my sense of the holy are things that I think of as spiritual practices. These are the things that recharge my soul's batteries and help me keep bringing that tenderness and love and compassion into the world. This spring, we are going to be exploring spiritual practices as a worship theme for the coming months and outside of worship as well. And I invite you to join, not just in our worship services, but in trying out some of these spiritual practices as well. Each week, you'll be introduced to a spiritual practice. You'll be given some questions for reflection, which will occur later in the service today. And these will be shared by myself sometimes, but they'll also be shared by you, members of this congregation, who find great solace, comfort, and strength in their own spiritual practices. So if that is you, please let me know, because I would love to create a platform for you to share your own spiritual practices with your community. Each week, you'll receive these opportunities to practice a new thing, and you'll have opportunities to respond in different ways. We'll have some conversation on Facebook. We'll have some conversation after the services. There might be a chance to contribute things that will be in the Beacon Bits, and who knows what we'll come up with. Today, I would like to share a body prayer, or a moving meditation, if you will. Now, Julian of Norwich founded an order, a religious order, and that religious order developed a prayer that is very similar to this. And so that's kind of the tie-in here. So I invite you to join in a body prayer. This one developed by a UU religious educator by the name of Annie Scott. So I will show you the motions, and then I will invite you to move through it with me once. And then we will all pray with our bodies in silence 3 times. So let me show you. We begin with our hands in front of us. And maybe you want to have your hands open in front of you. Maybe you want to have your hands on your heart. Perhaps you would like to have your hands in a more traditional prayer pose. We begin with our hands in front of us to find our inner quiet. This is something you can do seated or standing or in your mind if you would prefer. We begin with our hands in front of us to find our inner quiet. And we raise our arms up high to open ourselves to the spirit of life, the God of love. We bring our hands back down to our hearts to affirm the strength of the voice within us. We extend our hands out in front of us to offer kindness and respect to others. We lift our hands in front of us to offer to others and the world all we have to give. And we lift our hands high over our heads again, reaching out to the world and being open to all it might offer. And we bring our hands down, gathering in the gifts and bringing them to our heart, returning to stillness. I'll guide you through this one more time, and then we'll repeat it 3 times in silence. We begin with our hands in front of us to find our inner quiet. We raise our arms up high, opening ourselves to the spirit of life. And we bring our hands to our hearts, opening ourselves to our inner voice. We extend our hands in front of us to offer kindness and respect. We lift our hands to offer to others and the world all we have to give. And we stretch high over our heads, reaching out and being open to what the world might offer us. And we bring our hands down, gathering these gifts to our heart. May the gifts of the world and the gifts of your heart be present with you this week. And may we all practice, may we all bring more tenderness, compassion, and love into our world. I invite you now to sit